Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand, owner of the company Horns of Odin. And before we get into the show, I just need to do a quick little bit of housekeeping. We have to try and keep the lights on here. And the best way to support us so we can keep doing that is through our Patreon. It's just patreon.com/Nordic Mythology podcast. It starts from £3 a month. So that's just 10p a day. You get a bonus episode every week. You get ad-free episodes. You get early access to the episodes. You can watch live. You can access the live chat during the episodes. And you also get our Discord server where we have a nice little community of like-minded people over there. And we all have a good chat. It's a lot of fun. And for the next tier up, you also get the Storytime episodes with Jonas Lorentzen. We've just started reading Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology, which is a lot of fun. We really enjoy those episodes. They're quite loose. Me and Jonas just have a good laugh on there. And the top tier, you get some discounts off merch at Nordic Mythology Podcast or at Horns of Odin. So if you can, please go check them out. And obviously not everyone's able to support financially. So if you can just share the episodes, leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review, or even just follow us on the social media channels, just at Nordic Mythology Podcast. It all helps get the podcast out to new listeners, and we can keep growing, and maybe they can kind of help us out on the Patreon side of things as well. And that's enough of the plugs. I'm very excited for this episode. I had a lot of fun with Julian last time, so we're gonna do it again, and you're gonna teach me a lot about the colder side of life. So today's guest is Julian Post-Melbye. Julian, welcome back. Thank you for coming back once again.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me back. I had a great time last time, and I hope it'll be fun again.
I'm sure it will be, and you've got a beer this time, and that always makes it a little bit more fun.
Yes, I might even loosen up on the facts after a while.
Yeah, no, you keep them. You have to keep them factual. I'm the only one that's allowed to make like wild claims because everybody expects that from me. You have a reputation to uphold.
Yeah, I guess so. But usually, we have a saying: you shouldn't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Absolutely, no, you shouldn't. We have the same one. So, can you just, for people who haven't listened to the first episode, do go and listen to that. It's a great episode. There's a lot of information in there, and it's a completely different subject to anything we've ever covered on the podcast before. But can you give people a quick kind of overview on who you are, what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Julian Post-Melbye, and I'm an archaeologist at the Museum of Cultural History at the University of Oslo. And the main reason I have ended up on the podcast is because I work on the Glacial Archaeology program, known to many people as Secrets of the Ice, as our public outreach. And it is saving artifacts that are melting out of the ice in the high mountains of South Central Norway due to climate change. And it's a sad story, but a lot of interesting archaeology comes out of the ice.
Mm-hmm. And some beautiful photos. We touched on those last time as well, but every time I look back through the social media, the photos are absolutely stunning of what you find in the places you go.
Yeah, it's these objects, because they've been preserved in ice and everything is just pristine, they're very forgiving for taking pictures of, and also having them out in the high mountains gives you a great backdrop. So all the essential ingredients of a beautiful photo are already there for us to work with. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you have to get whatever you find, do you have to get it back in ice? I guess because obviously it's been preserved so well in the ice. Does it start to just disintegrate as soon as it comes out?
It depends on the material. Wood is okay. It does fine. But leather, especially leather, if it starts drying and drying quickly, it will crack and can fall apart. Mm-hmm. So, for example, we found a couple of objects of leather this year that we could talk about. We found like the bit and bridle for a horse with the leather parts that go over the head. The bridle was preserved. I think it's late Iron Age Viking era. Could be older or younger, but very interesting. But we only have, for example, from the Viking Age in Norway, with the actual leather preserved for the horse bridle, one other find. So this is the
Okay.
second one, and the other one is from a burial mound at Borre with lots of gold on it. So it's like this is a utilitarian piece. And the only other example we have from the Norwegian Viking Age is like chieftain category, gold,
Hmm.
bedazzled horse gear.
Hmm.
And we also found what you call the leather arm protection piece for protecting
Like
your
a
wrist
yeah,
for the bowstring.
like a brace. I think it's a
Yeah,
vembrace. A vembrace, I think, is it?
yeah.
I
But
think.
yeah. So they are, for example, those were made of leather, and they will easily start to crack, and because they become very stiff if they dry too quickly.
Hmm.
So those we pack in. There's lots of ice there, so we just pack them in ice in the boxes and then get them off the mountain. Um, the the ices might be melted by the time we're out, but at least they're cold and wet
Hmm.
until we get them into a freezer again.
Okay. Do they? Is ice the best way to preserve these things? Oh, I guess. What happens to the items that you find, say in a burial mound that isn't around ice? Would that go into a freezer back at a museum until it can be put in a bed? I don't know. I guess I don't really know where things are kept. So maybe you have a better idea.
But generally, these kind of leather objects won't get preserved anywhere else than in ice or, for
Okay.
example, waterlogged in a bog or in a cultural layer in a medieval urban uh, town, because they are, there's no oxygen kind of if they get uh, in those kind of settings. So a leather object found waterlogged, you'll just keep it in water
Hmm.
because that's like the same environment until you can get
Oh,
it freeze dried.
okay. So
Uh,
so is it the oxygen that's the problem? So could you effectively store them forever in a vacuum type room situation? You're
in a
smiling at me.
vacuum, yeah, I don't really know. I'm not a physicist, so I don't know about a vacuum, but like you could potentially preserve them forever frozen, for
Okay.
example.
I guess I
Uh,
was thinking so where so people could look at them, I guess, and enjoy them, or
yeah,
I guess study them. How easy is it when it's in ice?
yeah. But you can have things frozen without them being inside of ice. For example, the ice mummy that's exhibited in Bolzano in Italy, Ötzi, the Stone Age mummy.
Okay, yeah,
He's frozen all the time, and they've got like a porthole you can look into the freezer kind of thing. I
okay.
think. Um, yeah, but that's just the great thing about the whole glacial archaeology program is all these organic objects preserved in ice that you just really don't get anywhere else because the wood is better preserved than you would get in bogs.
Hmm.
Because in a bog, they are preserved, but their structural integrity is gone. So
Yeah.
you really can't pick them up. They'll just be soggy like a sponge. So you have to preserve them with like submerging them in polyethyl glycol, like they will replace the water with wax, so that you can
Oh, okay.
actually freeze dry them and then lift them up.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
I think they do a similar thing with like a type of resin
yeah,
for when you move things. You like inject it with a resin in it.
yeah. So normally you'd have to replace whatever has preserved it with something else so that it doesn't fall apart. But
Mhm.
all the things that have been preserved in ice, they have just been in stasis pretty much. So when they melt out, you can handle them again.
So, what makes ice such a good preserver? I guess
Uh,
of
well,
organic material in particular.
there's no oxygen when it's frozen, and they also are practically dry at the same time. So there's like a natural freeze drying process.
Okay. Is it were these found? Is this the same when you found the horse bridle? Is this on the same path that you were telling us about last time that goes up to? Was it that you thought maybe there was a village?
Yeah. So this we did work on a different part of the mountain pass. So this year we did field work on the south side of the Lembren Pass. We've never been there before, or we've never done systematic field work there before. So we weren't quite sure what to find. We had a feeling or at least hopes that there would be more of the mountain pass or traces of the mountain pass on the other side of the mountain as well. And there certainly was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that because I think am I remembering this correctly that the last time we spoke, like I said, people can go back and listen to this episode. There was the mountain pass and then some sort of civilization or some sort of village type. Or was it like farmland? Was it farmland?
Summer farms or lodgings, because there's so the Lembren mountain pass, it crosses the Norwegian mountain range of Lomseggen at over 1900 meters, and then it just follows the mountain plateau at 1200 meters towards the south, and a bit way in further after the pass, we've found a settlement site with the leftover 20 structures, where we have done test excavations in a couple of them, and we've dated the site to the Viking Age, carbon dated the fire pits. So we're pretty sure about that date. And, we know the path leads there because the cairns are still preserved, and where there is soil, the ground is so worn by all the walking. So it's you can see the paths 1,000 years later.
Oh, wow. Is that similar in when you go walking in the woods and you can kind of tell, you can tell the footpath? It's very clear where you'd go. Is it similar to that?
Yeah, so parts of this is like that. You can see that it's been worn many times, and some parts of it have gotten wet, so they've started walking a bit further to one side, and then you have places where there's 7 parallel paths just going the same way because they've wanted to keep dry. So parts of it are very obvious, and other parts are more harder to piece together.
That must be. I can't even imagine being in that position where looking at this path that has been preserved, that so many people have walked, like I say, 1,000 years ago, pretty much relatively untouched since then. That must be so surreal.
It's a very it is, because we are we know that this pass and this path probably went out of use at the end of the medieval period in Norway. So it's hardly been used, and it does, at least for the last 600-700 years. You can you feel like you're in untouched history. And also, since it's the high mountains, there's no development, there's no buildings. Mm-hmm. You can walk around and you can't see. For example, if you're standing on top of the Lembren Pass, where we've found all these objects, and you look down towards the area where there is this Viking settlement, and you have this massive vista over huge mountain areas, and you can't see a single modern structure or road or antenna or anything, because you're in a lucky spot. You just can't see any signs of human interaction with the landscape, apart from the things that were done 1,000 years ago. And that's a privileged position to be in this world today.
Yeah,
especially in Europe.
Absolutely. And you're seeing it relatively untouched as to what they would have seen, which is got to be a special moment.
Yeah, it makes it easier to kind of you feel like you can easily perceive what they have seen and thought while moving through the landscape in a very different way than being on an excavation in modern like farmland or in a city, or even excavating grave mounds that you can just see modern buildings all around, kind of. So it's you you feel like you see what they saw, at least.
Hmm. I guess you're a little bit more connected to it. Am I remembering correctly? The settlement, did it only have one path in, one in the same path in and the same path out? And
Yeah.
did you say now that you excavate where you're excavating the south side, is that it goes through, or am I misunderstanding?
Now this is still on the way, or like this is um no, all of this is on one side of the settlement.
Oh, okay. I thought when you said you'd not been there before that you'd kind of discovered
Oh
that
yeah.
the pass went through the village.
No, not like that. But this is just this is just like the villages on the one side of the mountain range. But the mountain range, of course, is has two sides to it, with a which is a quite a big area. And
Hmm.
there's so we've found another site on the south end of the south side of the mountain pass, whereas before we've been working on the north end of the mountain pass.
Okay, I'm with you. And is this where because you show me the picture of an arrow that's been found? Was that here, or was that
Wait, I show you. There was a picture of a bow, I think I
was
sent
it
you earlier.
a bow? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was just an example of some. So yeah, we've published that on Secrets of the Ice, but so people can go there and have a look at stuff we've found this year.
Hmm.
But among other things, we found parts of a composite bow, which
Yeah.
has been it's a bow that's been laminated to different types of wood, and previously, before we started finding these composite bows on the ice patches, they've generally believed to be taken in, come into use in Norway, like in, after the Viking Age, in the medieval period. So after 1000 AD. But we've found a few of these now, and we've carbon dated them, some of them, and one of the more complete ones where we both have both sides of the laminated, or both of the laminated pieces, both the ridge, which is made of birch, and then the inside facing the archer, which is made out of pine. It was dated to the early Viking Age, which is quite a divide between what we knew previously and what we now have data to use in discussions. There's 200 years of pushing an object back in time.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say it's very surprising. We knew that composite bows were in use in the rest of Europe, so it's not a shock. But it's just something that gives us opportunity to pursue new topics in the
Hmm.
Norwegian Viking Age.
Yeah, and I guess you always get those people who say until you find it, then it doesn't exist. So when you find it, you can kind of go, okay, now we can actually put it back there. So are you up to like what is a composite bow? Are you Have you done enough research to explain that to me? Because I've always heard of a composite bow, and I feel like I kind of maybe know what
Yeah,
it is and why they laminate the two together. But if you know, I would love to
yeah,
know exactly.
yeah. I'll try to explain. Uh, because we can just start with a normal longbow, which is made out of one piece of, for example, yew, which was popular
Hmm.
at the time. And that's just one single piece of wood, and they could be quite long. Whereas a composite bow, you take, for example, two different species of wood, which have different characteristics they're good at. So in Norway at the time, they used, let me just get this straight. So birch on the outside, so facing away from the archer, would be birch, and that's the part of the bow that stretches when you draw it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the inside, they would use pine, which would be compressed as you draw the bow. That the inner part would compress towards each other. And birch has better stretching properties, and pine has better compression properties. So by combining them, you could have a stronger bow, which was shorter. So you could get more power into a smaller object. So it's a smaller frame, but more power. And this could also be done. Like they also did composite bows with like sinews in the middle and like other places, and like horn. Yeah, so you use different materials to get certain characteristics, like you mix and matching.
And that's so fascinating that people knew. The people just simply knew how to do that. With I don't know, I probably would never figure that out. You could just leave a bunch of Dans on an island for 1,000 years, and we're never figuring that out. We're still using longbows, if we even develop a bow, to be fair. But if we do, we're still just using a longbow. We're never figuring out how to put two together and to get it shorter and better and just improve it.
Yeah, but I think people in the past, a lot of them just were practical engineers.
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of knew how stuff worked,
mm-hmm.
and just lived their life.
Are you able to tell how they stuck the two together? From especially with this one that's kind of complete, can you? Because they don't have like a two-part epoxy or a super glue.
Now, so on the ones that we've found here, there is no visible adhesive, and certain adhesives are preserved better than others. So, for example, if you have what was used like in lots of like historic times, prehistoric times, I guess, as well. In for example, Norway is fish glue. Fish skins cooked down or boiled down to just their sticky mass, and they don't really get preserved. They kind of just wash away.
Okay.
So that's an option because, for example, tar made out of birch bark that preserves work very well. For example, we see that on the arrows where the fletchings and arrowheads have been glued on with birch tar. It's still preserved. But other arrows, we have the feathers, but there's no adhesive left. Kind of, it's disappeared. So then you can infer that it's made out of something that will more easily disintegrate.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's on the list of things to do more research on, and after discussing it, like we have a very good lab at the University of Oslo at the museum that does a lot of research into organic compounds and materials due to the Saving Oseberg project, where we're like trying to make sure that the Viking ships don't fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
So we have like good facilities for this stuff, and they think they should be able to kind of find traces of the resin of the adhesives, even though they are completely gone to the naked eye right now.
Yeah, you would assume that we must leave a trace of something.
Yeah. Yes, there's probably like, for example, if they use the fish glue, there should certainly be an abundance of like lipids, like fats, still soaked into the wood that we can find. So we think we're going to figure it out. We just have to get around to it.
Yeah, I would love to just know how these things were discovered. Like the first person who boiled down the fish skin long enough to get this sticky thing. I was like, oh, glue, I guess. Like I would just love to have just see that moment and be like, oh, okay, this is like the creation of a new thing.
Yeah. And it was probably, invented separately several times by many people.
Mm-hmm.
But, they ate a lot of fish, and certain species of fish, they get very quickly very sticky.
Okay.
And all the skin, if you're cooking it. So you can, I guess, it's something like, if I cook this a bit more after I'm finished eating, maybe it'll get even more sticky.
Yeah, I guess you're probably correct. And obviously, Scandinavians eat a lot of fish, whereas, I'm in the middle of England where, I don't eat anywhere near as much fish as I probably should. So I would never, sticky and fish would never be in the same vocabulary, in the same sentence for me. Like, they're just not two things that go together, because I guess I just don't cook enough fish, probably. So it's fascinating that's kind of where I'd heard of, is it horse glue
I
from,
think
I think they use,
you can make, I think you can make glue out of a lot of animal fats.
yeah. I feel like horse glue was used for the back of stamps. I think it was like the back of stamps in England, and then they had to change it because it was like vegans couldn't use
I had that. Yeah,
stamps.
don't want to lick the stamp.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah, I feel like they had to change it because of that. And you know what? The stamps and the envelopes got really fucking shit. Like, before, it was really, you could just like lick the envelope and stick it in, and you were good. And now all your stuff's falling out. The envelope doesn't work properly. So, as much as I love horses, we need to go back to the the horse glue, because it worked so much better. Uh,
Uh,
oh, James said there were animal fats in the new £5 notes. I think I remember seeing that as well. It's yeah, it's a fascinating thing. But yeah, I'd love to just see that moment when somebody was like the aha. And it could have been by accident. Could have just
yeah,
overcooked their fish, I guess. And
yeah. But this is I guess you say the happy coincidences with archaeology. It's like you find one thing and then you get the opportunity to pursue something completely different, like finding a piece of a bow on a Norwegian mountain pass at 2,000 meters gives you the opportunity to do a lot of work on adhesives or glue in the
yeah,
Iron Age. It's not immediately obvious that these go together, but these all these interesting rare organic finds from mountains, they are like, they're like small keys that just unlock completely different subjects they that you don't immediately think about them belonging to.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's something that you wouldn't until it happens. You might not think about even going down that path. I mean, it must be a strong glue if they're still stuck together 1,000 years. You said the one that you found recently, the two parts were still together.
Or they've fallen from each other, but
Oh,
we
okay.
we found them together.
But
But
you, yeah.
we have other glues that are still stuck.
Wow.
So
So do we know what a bow would have been doing up there? Because I guess for the most part, bow would either be for hunting or for war, I guess.
this mountain pass goes through a very good. There are good hunting grounds as well. There's traces of hunting in the area. There's lots of reindeer
Okay.
in these mountains at that time. So
Okay.
it was most likely used for hunting. Of course, you could use it for other things as well. We've found on the Lemden Pass, we've also found war arrowheads, that are made for breaching chainmail and not for hunting,
Mm-hmm.
because they're just made for piercing through armor instead of hunting, like big game hunting. They will be very broad bladed, for the animals to bleed out
Okay.
quickly. So you can see very easily see the difference between a arrow made for war, for example, in the Viking Age, and one made for hunting. They are kind of distinctly different, even though they both will kill anything. One is
So
better at breaching armor, and one is better at bleeding out a big animal.
so what would a war arrowhead look like? Would it be just thinner?
Yeah, so they are Yeah, they are. It's more like a needle. Like it
Okay.
would be just more. It would be pointed. It wouldn't have like a broad blade shape. It would just be a point to punch
Mhm.
through chainmail, for example.
Would that be
So
of like of a stone or
iron.
of an iron? Okay.
Yeah. So like if you just picture in your head just an iron tipped arrow without without any oh, I forget the name right now for
Like the wing type, I guess
yeah,
that's
so
the
so
right word.
without a barb or anything,
Okay.
just a straight up pointy end.
Hmm. Would do you think maybe you can answer this? This is a question I've always wondered. Do you think most arrows would have just been a sharpened stick, um, or would they have had the ability and the amount of iron to make a little arrowhead for every arrow? Because I feel like that's a
Every arrow would have an iron arrowhead.
I would okay because
Yeah,
I
all
just
of them.
assumed that a lot would just be like a carved like a pointed stick with some flies on, and then for the more expensive, the more affluent you were, then you could maybe afford the iron tips, or for a specific purpose like war, or
Yeah.
I guess.
No, but you need the weight in
Okay.
front to get the to actually get a good flight out of an arrow because it needs to be balanced. Kind of, you need if it was just a pointed stick, just all that power from the bowstring would probably just flip it straight over.
Okay. I never knew that.
So all of for example, in the Viking Age, all of them have iron arrowheads stuck to them. Uh, but but we know that there was iron at one point. Iron was very expensive or rare. So even though the Norwegian Iron Age begins at 500 BC, and we see iron objects, especially like knives and cutting implements, are normal in the pre-Roman Iron Age. Iron arrowheads, they don't become normal until 200, 300 AD. So like well into the Roman or late into the late Roman period. So you have like 800 years of the Iron Age where they choose to make arrowheads out of especially bone or antler, but also out of stone still, even though they have iron production technology.
Okay.
So that says something about the value of iron, in the early Iron Age.
Hmm.
And but from 200, 300 AD, they start to exclusively use iron in the arrowheads, and then that remains that way until today.
So an arrow would be a valuable commodity. You wouldn't just fire it and not go, because I guess for somebody like me that is just a casual, I guess, when it comes to archery. When you watch films and TV shows, those fuckers are just firing arrows left, right, and center, and they don't care, and they just leave them there. Where it feels like if you've got this little iron tip on it and there's the work into to make it, you would probably want to go and get that if possible.
Certainly, you would well, the ones we find are just the ones they couldn't find again, like that disappeared. For example, they did a lot of hunting on the snow or on the snow that's on the ice. And, if you miss something and you hit the snow, it can just disappear kind of into the depths. You'll
Mm.
never find it again.
Yeah. So
But they probably retrieved all that they could.
yeah. So what about a bow? Because again, I imagine especially a composite bow would be an expensive item. How do you think that ended up just in the snow? Because did it have any other items around it? Because I assume it wasn't like, because you didn't find a body.
No,
Maybe
but
they died with it.
we don't really know when because we found it broken in pieces.
Okay.
So it could have just broken as they were using it, and then they just tossed it. We don't know if that happened uh, at the time it was deposited there or not. but that seems like a likely reason to toss a bow. And you're hunting and you're using it, and suddenly it gives out, and then you're like, okay, I'll just leave this here. I'm not going to carry it back home.
Yeah. So are you able to tell whether it broke pre-ice or post-ice? Like, can you tell that it was, or is it just
Well,
most likely?
sometimes, it's easy to say if it was broken post depositionally, like after it ended up in the ice. Because sometimes we can see that it's like the way it's been torn, for example. But like if an object has broken before it ended up in the ice, it's harder to see if it's happened before or during, kind of. So it's easy to say the one thing, but it's harder to say the other. So we can say certain objects have been ruined in the ice, whereas other ones we can, like, they are broken now. We don't know when it happened.
But even with that, for me, my imagination goes wild that you have this person who's probably hunting. I imagine maybe drawn the bow to fire an arrow, and it's maybe snapped unintentionally because it's old, and then the frustration of, because again, I imagine it's an expensive piece. The frustration of it being broken, probably irreparable, so he just tosses it to the side in kind of disgust. You can kind of create this or paint this picture of who he might have been.
Yeah, you can certainly, when you find these objects, it's almost like you can feel a certain sense of frustration through them. And they certainly had a lot of curse words. I'm pretty sure that they knew how to.
Yeah, they must have had
to let their expirations out.
Yeah, because I cannot imagine that a bow like that would have been. Do we know the kind of people that were using this pass? Would it have been the elite? Like, so can then we draw whether this bow would have been an elite item, or would it be quite common?
So this mountain pass seems to be a thing that was in common use by all people. That wasn't exclusively used by elites, or who knows if it was exclusively used by just normal people. But certainly normal people were there. And this bow would have been a nice object, no matter who was using it. But it's not exclusive to anybody per se. But it was decorated. It was carved. It has carvings, like, just for purely decorative reasons. So it's somebody's cherished this object at some point. But we find a lot of utilitarian objects at these sites. They aren't the fancy version of the horse equipment. We find a lot of the everyday sort of horse equipment, and you get the sense that it's all kinds of, like, all different types of people from society, because we found toys, so indicating kids who come along, and you see the movement of livestock. So it's like whole family groups or extended families moving back and forth through the mountains together. You get the sense of.
What does a Viking age mountain pass toy look like?
It's a toy arrow.
Of course it is. Teach them young.
Yes, it's like an arrow is 30 centimeters long.
Okay, so how do you determine that it's a toy and not just a little child warrior out there firing little arrows?
Well, it's just it's pretty much just a miniature version, and it's also a blunt arrow. Like it doesn't have a pointed end; it just has a weighted end, kind of like a club on the end of it. So you could shoot it with like a weight distribution on the arrow, but it can't penetrate anything.
So could it, rather than a toy, could it be almost like a training aid?
But it's also very small. It's.
Oh, but that's what I mean. Like, could it be a training aid for a child? Because I guess.
Oh, of course it could be, but yeah. So yeah, it could of course be like it's a toy and something to learn with at the same time. But
Well,
it's
yeah,
not. It's not
most toys
some.
are.
Yeah, but it's an arrow that couldn't do any damage, and it wouldn't be even strong enough for like hunting a squirrel
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
it's just small and thin, and you would need a very weak bow, to fire
Hmm.
it because the draw would only be
Yeah.
20 centimeters. Yeah, it's just a very like
It's a
fun
neat,
little object.
it is a very neat little item. And then because it's just got me wondering whether you would have like because obviously, oh God, wow, the more I think about it, the more fun this gets. Because obviously kids like to play with guns. Kids like to play with weapons. Like it is something that we, for some reason, like especially little boys, just love having like little rifles for whatever reason. So I wonder if that's a similar sort of thing that they see their parents hunting and having a bow and arrow, and it's just something that they can have, and maybe it had like a little bow that they could just fire around and have a little bit of fun with.
Yeah, if we get really lucky one day, maybe we'll find a wooden sword.
Oh yeah, just
Because
a little small one. They
I
must
think
they
yeah,
must
because if
exist.
yeah, yeah, or if memory serves me correct, I think it's the one of the medieval towns in I think it's Trondheim has like a toy sword made out of wood found in like a cultural layer from like 1100 or 1200 AD, like a toy wooden sword.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does completely make sense that because it is like most toys as well. If you think, obviously, some toys are just toys, but a lot are aimed at teaching something alongside playing. So it would make sense that you just kind of get them started on these things that were deemed to be very important. And I imagine hunting and being a skilled archer is a very important skill.
Well, you can see, yeah, the archery it was a very important skill, and a lot of um, written sources that about like for example sagas they bring that to the forefront in certain stories. That archery was an important skill, and you have Norse gods that kind of were
Mm-hmm.
known for their archery skills, and it's an important part of. I guess it was just an important skill in that time
Mm-hmm.
or at that time, both for hunting and for war.
Yeah. We touched on it a little bit but before the episode, we said we were going to talk about iron production, and we've kind of started down that path a little bit. And you were telling me how during sort of the Viking Age, iron went from being fairly sparse up to being pretty an abundance. Am I right? I'm not misquoting you there.
All right, yeah, you can. I guess you can say it went from being not sparse, but in the Viking Age, it went from at the beginning of the Viking Age. It's there, and there's enough of it, but through the Viking Age and then into like 1000 or 1100 AD, you get an overabundance. It goes
Okay.
from there's enough for us to it's an industrial production that is enough for everyone and the rest of the Nordic countries and some more as well. It goes from local production to regional to like
Mhm.
international amounts of iron production in Norway.
Is that so? That's particular in Norway. Is there a reason for that? Is there a lot of iron ore?
Yes, so there is a lot of natural occurring bog ore in Norway, because there will be iron in the bogs, like in Norway.
Okay.
It's a geologically, uh, it's just, we have bogs that are, uh, well, they have the geological composition of the bedrock and the bogs that gives us the bog ore, so it's there in the bottom of the box as like a layer
Hmm.
of ore that can be extracted. You don't have to go into a mountain or stone, to
Okay.
extract it. You can dig it out of a bog. So you just and you can see it on the surface if you're walking around a bog in Norway, and you can see this like red oily film on the water on a bog.
Okay.
Then you know that there's bog or in that bog, because it's so then you could just dig down in the bog and you get to a layer of ore that you can extract, with a shovel.
Okay.
Quite easily, and then you and of course I'm just saying you, and then but of course there's a
Yeah.
but this, it's accessible with the tools that are widely available. You don't need to build a mine or something kind of where you'd like into the mountains to extract like iron ore from a mountain. That's a completely different process. But you got bog ore that you can extract, and then you roast it so you get rid of the organic material that's also at the bottom of the bog and all the water content, and then you're there with the pure ore that you can put into a furnace and then reduce that to get rid of the slag, and so you end up with iron. So and then Norway is also covered in forests in these same areas where you have a lot of bog ore, and that is of course the perfect fuel for getting to produce all this iron as well. So you have like all the resources you need to produce iron are in the same areas or in the same area, because this stretches along the this southern half of Norway is kind of like the central part of it. It's like a spine. A mountain just stretches from through the southern half of Norway and towards Trondheim in Sweden. And this is like the area where there will be ore in the bogs. And I can't say a number, but we have found thousands and thousands of sites for iron production. Wow. From the Viking Age and late medieval period.
So, as it gets more, you get more of an abundance of iron. Do you see a big influx of different items being made that I guess aren't essential, maybe more luxury items made out of iron? Because I assume when you've only got a small amount, you're making the necessities.
Yeah, and in some parts you can kind of yes and no. I guess we can start with saying, like, in the Viking Age, there's a massive amount of iron objects in the grave mounds. There will be 20, 30, 40 items made out of iron in like 800, 900 AD in a grave. There's a sword, there's arrowheads, shields, axes, cauldrons, bits and bridles for horses, and all that kind of stuff. Even chainmail and a helmet. This is a lot. But so before we got carbon datings of all the iron production sites, in the 60s through the 70s, prior to that, we thought that the big peak in iron production in Norway was in the Viking Age, because there was just so much iron everywhere. But after we've excavated a lot of these production sites and carbon dated, now we have, over 1,000 carbon datings on this subject. And then we can see that the massive amounts of iron in the graves are from, not the peak of production, but like the flowering of when the great increase in production started. So they got a lot of iron, started becoming abundant, but I guess it was still kind of viewed as a bit of a luxury. So it was easy to get a hold of, but still perceived as a very nice piece of equipment to put into graves. And so that's one thing. You can see there's not a direct correlation between that. But there's also, but if you want to think about more like a direct or or it doesn't have to be a cause or effect, but they could be separate things that just happen to happen at the same time. But you see a shift in how they made food, for example,
Okay.
from the late like Roman period migration era, like into 600, like say for example to 600 AD. There was a lot of cooking pits for like roasting meat underground,
Mm-hmm.
and you have lots of pottery for
Okay.
making food. So that you can
Yeah.
see these big feastings. All the feasts were like outside communal. You could feed lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, then when you and you come into the late Iron Age, towards the Viking period, cooking pits disappear. The pots made out of clay disappear, and you start getting big spits, cooking spits. Like if you want to
Oh,
put a
okay.
whole roast over a fire made out of iron,
Yeah.
or you get iron cauldrons to put over a fire, or soapstone. But you can see like more cooking utensils being made out of iron.
Well, okay.
But
Yeah.
this also has something to do with the shift of the displays of power being outside and communal but in the Viking Age they move into the hall and become hidden. It's for the elite instead of for the people, or
Mm-hmm.
for a bigger group of people.
Yeah.
So these things kind of they coalesce, into one thing, but it's several like objects, like certain features disappear, new objects are added to the repertoire, and the ritual practices change. So this happens all together, So the cause and effect is not easy to disentangle, but it's there. There's something going on.
Mm-hmm. So, do we get any nice cast iron skillets for cooking the steak on?
Yeah. So you got frying pans are like a new thing.
Yeah.
I think I've excavated two Viking Age graves where I found frying pans in them. Yeah.
Oh, I was joking. I didn't even.
No,
I
no, no,
didn't
no.
realize it was actually going to have a frying pan.
Yeah, no, they had frying pans were a thing in the Viking Age, and they loved putting them in graves for some reason. Uh, they're quite cool because they've had the handles, are like maybe not completely a meter long, but they're very long handles.
Okay. Were they? Did they tend to be quite big? So it was like a communal cooking frying pan.
No, they tend to be small.
Oh, okay.
20 centimeters in diameter,
I guess I'll.
or more like that size. But
Yeah.
they are more likely maybe for bread, for example, on a fire.
Oh, yeah.
Like not, they don't seem to be particularly made for meats, for
Yeah.
example. Because you have big spits for
Mm-hmm.
roasting, and yeah. So
When do we start to see things like steels and alloys introduced? Is that way later
that or before even,
or before?
because they can make steel. They will carbonize the iron to get like a steel edge on it.
Okay.
So that's something that's been, we've done. I've done a bit of analysis on it. Where you take and cut a piece out of the blade of an
Mm-hmm.
object, like a knife or a sword, to get a metallurgical analysis done on it. So we know kind of like that they like made steels, or at least steel edged cutting implements, but it's a hard it's a tricky field of research that I have decided not to pursue. So you need a lot of knowledge about metallurgy, and that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
field unto itself.
Yeah, and I guess you're a busy man up in the mountains now.
Well, yeah, but archaeology is like you. It's a very expansive field of research. You become like the jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I
Yeah.
guess that's why it's fun too, because you get to do a little bit of everything.
Hmm.
Um, but you also kind of end up as, you know a lot about something and not,
Yeah.
uh, or
Mm.
at least in my job, I get to just do a lot of everything instead of spending all my time on a very small piece of prehistory. I get to like bounce around and
Yeah.
do work on lots of things.
Do you enjoy that rather than because yeah, because you get some people who they'll spend 40 years on one small niche little topic
Yeah.
and then that's just their thing. Whereas I guess that's not
Yeah.
really for me to maybe be as niche as that.
Yeah, I'm very good at starting things. I guess if you're that kind of
Hmm.
person,
Yeah, that
especially,
I'm very good at that.
yeah.
I
So if you're like that, it's nice. You'll always be doing something, something new. Like for example, yeah, this week I started a new excavation on a Bronze Age settlement site.
Mhm.
That was something else than being up in the mountains for the past 2 months before that again. And then I'll probably be back in the office in 2 months, and then back to the mountain finds and cataloging them. So it's nice to jump back and forth different subjects, so you don't get a
Mhm.
burnout on any one thing.
Yeah. Do you at least finish the things you start, or you a sucker for starting things and then
Well,
moving on to the next one?
I guess it's my job to finish some of them. So
You have to.
we have to, but that's. But after you take a break, it's fun to come back in and continue working on things.
Mhm. Which
So,
area do you find most? Do you find one just pulls you in more than others, or you get more excited to go back to?
oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's certainly the project that is Secrets of the Ice is always the big draw, and it's there beckoning to be worked on
Yeah.
or done something with. It's just leagues beyond anything else, kind of in interest.
Hmm.
It's just it's just
Yeah.
fresh, always fresh. There's always something new happening, and you always get to be at the fore. Like you're always at the pushing the edge of archaeological knowledge. You're not just like adding another piece to the data set. You're always like you're picking up new pieces that are at the edges of known
Yeah.
prehistory, and there's a certain sense of satisfaction in that. Pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. And I guess you're dealing with a lot of organic materials, which you're not getting elsewhere. So you really are getting these items that could just be completely unique.
Yeah, and it's just yes, you get these stuff that you haven't seen before, and then you just get so many ideas for what you want to do. But it also is a lot easier to engage with the public with these objects. And as I mentioned briefly to you, that we open a new exhibition this
Hmm.
summer. It's at the Norwegian Mountain Center in Lom. It's a village up in the south central mountains on the northern end of Jotunheimen, where a lot of the objects that we have found encased in the ice in the mountains are on display. So for anybody traveling in Norway, that's well worth the trip
Hmm.
to visit this beautiful museum.
For a lot of people listening to this is going to be the first time they realize that there is actually a place in Norway called Jotunheimen. Like, because I didn't realize until 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I was like, oh, there's actually a little mountain ridge called that. And it's quite exciting for us outsiders.
Yeah, I guess it is, but that name is, I guess, is what we could say a later romanticization.
Oh, is
Uh,
it?
it's been in use for a long time, but I don't think it was called that 1,000 years ago.
Okay. It's maybe, yeah, a more modern
It's a
name.
more of a like modern renaming, like in a
Hmm.
in in
The,
like for like 150 years ago, 100 years ago, kind of thing.
the the exhibition looks beautiful from the photos that you sent me.
Yeah, it certainly is a very it focuses exclusively on the objects related to traveling across the mountains or hunting up high in the mountains. And then I guess it's one of the, I don't know, I guess I'm pretty biased, but I guess I'd say it's one of the better archaeological exhibitions you can see in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
But it's fairly niche, of course, because it's a small museum. But if you're interested in seeing unique archaeological objects that you can't see anywhere else, pretty much in Europe, even though they would have existed all over European prehistory, that's one of the places you can see them. There's not many of them. Like if you want to see prehistoric arrows in any amount, you can see them at, like, for example, Muskor Museum in Denmark, where they have the weapon offerings from the Danish bogs.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can see them in Bolzano in Italy, or you can see them in Lom in Norway. There's like, or the Mary Rose exhibition in, where do they have the warship in England? The Mary Rose is midi. Yeah. Anyway, there's tons of arrows there too, but there's all, yeah. But you have a couple.
Oh, go on, sorry.
Yeah, but anyway, you have only a couple of choices, in the whole European continent if you want to see these kind of things, So it certainly is a privilege to make one of those exhibitions.
I was going to say Portsmouth. It was built in Portsmouth, but I don't know if it's there. Yes, it is still. It's at Portsmouth, which is a big naval town in England.
Yeah, but of course, the Merrose there are lots of traces of archery history and a ton of other stuff, but all that's just like it's a snapshot of like one day in history. Yeah. But the thing with these ice sites we're working on, most of them have been in use we've been talking about the mountain passes now, but like for hunting, many of them have been in continual use for close to 6,000 years.
Okay, wow.
So you have like a series of 6,000 years of unique archaeological objects from one site, so you can study them in a very deep chronology.
Mm-hmm. So do you have to, when you're talking about being able to find items from such a vast time period, do you have to pull experts in for different time periods, or do you just kind of take the objects, put them back on ice, get them back to a museum or university, then figure out what you've got and get somebody who might know a little bit more about that specific time?
Yes. Yeah. So I of course have been working on this for many years. So I guess I've ended up with a lot of knowledge on a lot of the stuff we do find, and especially arrows, and I've done a lot of work on them from like the Stone Age until modern times. But I'm privileged enough to work at the Museum of Cultural History in Oslo, where we also store all these objects. And it's a fairly big archaeological institution. So there's always somebody that knows something about a certain subject. When you have 50 archaeologists at one place, there's always somebody researching a certain topic, or knows somebody else somewhere that you can get a hold of. But at least locally at us, we have a lot of skilled people working on a vast array of time and objects and theories, and anything, when there's so many people in one spot.
Yeah, next time I'm in Norway for a decent amount of time, I'm gonna have to take a drive up and visit the exhibition. Is it there permanently?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Or at least for the next 5 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be back.
So
I'm coming back on Monday actually, but it's only a short visit, so I'll be in Oslo for like 3 days. Tuesday to 4 days.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can, if you're around, we can grab a beer in person.
Yeah, I'm just here digging stuff.
Yeah,
we're just outside Oslo, closer to the airport. So
to which airport?
or but like it was just on the outside of town, like by Garden.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because obviously, anybody who's not been to Oslo and then has the displeasure of flying into Torm and realizing that Oslo has two airports and one of them is 2 hours away, is
Yeah,
that's always a lot of fun.
yeah.
Should
You
we
should.
should we wrap this up and let people ask you some questions if you've got a little bit of time?
Yeah, I just want to tell a little story,
Oh yes,
perhaps.
yes, yes,
Yes,
please.
like because most people are familiar with like the idea about how Norway got its name. You know that you follow the shipping lanes north,
Hmm.
which is the North Way. But
Yeah.
there's an alternative explanation. I'm not going to say anything about its veracity, but it existed back in the day as well. For example, it's mentioned in the Historia Norvegica, which is written. Oh, is it 1150 or 1250 AD? You know, so long time ago. I think it's so yeah, in medieval, written down in the medieval period. It's also mentioned in the Flatøya book, the saga,
Hmm.
which is also written down in that time. So there's like this story about a different naming of Norway or where the name comes from, and it's more related to the mountains instead of the sea.
Okay.
So it has several iterations. You know, sometimes they're humans, and other times they are Jotuns. You know, ice giants. So I guess we'll do the ice giant version because that's cooler.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, there's this ice giant. I can't remember his name, but he has two sons and a daughter. The sons are named Gud and Nur, and the daughter's name is Gua. And one day the daughter disappears. You know, she's vanished. They don't know where she is. So he sends his sons out to look for his daughter, and so he sends the one son Gua, no Gud, sends Gud along the sea to look for his daughter, and then sends his son Nord, which is like the Norwegian word also for north.
Hmm.
He sends him across the mountains, skiing across the mountains to look for his daughter. And Gud, who sails along the coast, he doesn't find his sister, but you know he becomes the king of those lands instead. Whereas Nord, who follows the way across the mountains, the north way across the
Hmm.
mountains, he finds his sister, and she's taken up house with this guy, but she's happily married to him now. So who cares? But so Nur decides to settle and become the king of the inland areas and the mountains and the snow, and that's why it's called Norsvei, Norveger.
Oh.
And that was, for example, presented as the reason for the naming of Norway in the medieval text of Historia Norvegica,
That's,
written by the Christian bishop or whatever it was. So it's just like it's a fascinating little story.
yeah, it is. I mean, the father really lost out there because he lost his daughter and he sent his two sons off to look for her, and then he just ended up with no children around anymore.
Yeah. So you know the I just find that fascinating because you know the story. You know it's a story of why it's called Norway. It doesn't have to be the right one, but it's a story that they chose to present
Hmm.
like 11 or 1200 AD, you know, and it probably existed way before that.
Hmm.
And it speaks to the importance of the mountains as part of the Norwegian kingdom as it was at that time. You know, this was an essential part of the land. You know, they knew it was rich in resources and people. So it's not just that the Norwegian Viking Age were people sailing in ships along the coast. It was also very much a land tied to to the inland forests and mountains and the resources that all that had to offer.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for the little story. I love just new little bits, new little takes on things. So yeah, let's wrap this up and let the people watching live ask you some questions. So again, if you can support us, it's Patreon/Nordic Mythology podcast, and you get a bonus episode every week. But you can also submit your questions before or in the live chat and ask our guests your own questions. If I've missed anything out or you want something expanding further, you get that opportunity. So, Julian, we can jump over there. Is there anything you want to plug or shout out where people can see all these beautiful photos, I guess, and follow your work?
Well, you can always follow us or check out our work at Secrets of the Ice on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, or even on our website, secretsoftheice.com. And I would certainly recommend anybody who has the chance to visit the Norwegian Mountain Center in Lom and the museum exhibitions there. The people working there, they are fantastic at making exhibitions and disseminating the history of the Norwegian mountains. And at the ice on the mountain above Lom, they've dug out a 70-meter deep tunnel into the ice, so you can experience walking through ice layers stretching 7,000 years back in time.
Wow!
So there's a lot to experience in Lom. So if you ever have the chance, the museum was open all year round. Of course, closed on a few days in the winter. And the ice tunnels open in the summer, so that's an experience of a lifetime. It's worth traveling. It's a destination in itself to visit an ice tunnel.
Wow. Okay, that's on my list. That's on my bucket list of things to do now. Perfect. Okay. And like I said before the show, if you can leave us a 5-star rating, positive review wherever you get your podcast, we appreciate that. Or just simply follow us on all the social medias at Nordic Mythology Podcast. But yeah, let's jump over and do a little Q&A.